Okay, back with more of our Theros Beyond Death limited set review, and we're into multicolored, and we'll get artifacts and lands in this video as well. These are all going to be non-commons, I believe, until we get to the artifacts and maybe the lands. But all the multicolor stuff, I think, is not common. I'll start with Acolyte of Affliction because it's, the first alphabetically. 4 mana, 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, you put the top two. You mill the top two of your library. Then you can turn a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. I mean, it's a 2-for-1. It gives you a 2/3, which is not great. And then you're going to get a permanent back almost certainly if you're in black-green, especially since it's not the beginning of the game. You might not want to just run this out on turn 4. You might want to try to get something better out of it. Having said that, it's not a great 2-for-1. Like, 4 mana 2/3 is not really where you want to be. You get some selection with the milling, and the milling helps a little bit with these are the two colors, I think, maybe along with red to some extent, that seem to have the most escape. So the milling is a little bit nice for that as well. Yeah, I'm gonna go B minus here. It's still a 2-for-1. 2-for-1s are still good, but it doesn't super excite me. Let's move to Allure of the Unknown. It's a rare. Reveal the top 6 cards of your library, and opponent exiles a non-land card from among them. You put the rest in your hand. The opponent may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. I think this card is terrible. Sure, you're gonna draw 5. Okay, maybe this card isn't terrible in limited. But you're gonna draw 5. Your opponent's gonna draw 1 plus a bunch of mana, and it's gonna be the best one, right? So you're probably gonna draw like 2 to 3 lands. They're not gonna give you those. Then you're gonna draw like 3 to 4 spells. You're gonna end up getting like 2 to 3 spells, and they're gonna get your best spell. And you're gonna get some lands too, which isn't nothing. But I am not excited about this card. It might be playable in limited. It's pretty tempo negative too, though. I don't think I like it. I'm gonna take a stand. I'm gonna say D minus. You need to have like a super homogenous deck to want this. Yeah, I don't like it. Ashiok, you can read it yourself. It's an A plus. I think this is the best card in the set. Even though it's 2 colors, even though it's 5 mana, this card is incredibly good. I haven't actually seen the whole set, but I imagine this is the best card in it. Atris, Oracle of Half-Truths. 4 mana, 3/2 menace. When it enters, your opponent looks at the top 3 of your library, separates them into a face-down and a face-up pile, and then you choose a pile and take those, and the others go in your graveyard. So it's at least a 4 mana, 3/2 draw 1 menace, which is good, and it's a little better than that because it's probably draw 2 bad ones or 1 good one. So yeah, I mean all of those modes are good. Not like the most amazing thing ever. Stuff going to your graveyard also kind of nice for escape. So yeah, it's a solid B. Bronzehide Lion, 2 mana 3/3, green white. You can spend green white to make it indestructible until end of turn, and when it dies, you return it to the battlefield as an aura, enchanting a creature you control, and giving that creature green white enchanted creature gains indestructible until end of turn. It loses all abilities means the Bronzehide Lion loses all other abilities. So Bronzehide Lion can't give itself indestructible once it's enchanting something as an aura. But I mean, the card already looks very good. It's not Fleecemane Lion, but it's very 2 mana 3/3 is already really good if you can cast it on turn 2. The indestructible is pretty nice later, and if you let it die, being able to make something else indestructible is also nice later. I think this card is like a B, maybe a B plus. I think I'm going to say B though. Calyx Destiny's Hand, 4 mana for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. +1, look at the top 4 of your library. You can reveal an enchantment from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on bottom in a random order. You're going to have a lot of enchantments in this set, but you're not going to have so many that this doesn't whiff a good amount of the time. So it will hit probably reasonably often, but it's also going to whiff some too. Keep that in mind. Then -3, exile target creature or enchantment you don't control until target enchantment you control leaves the battlefield. So you turn one of your enchantments on the battlefield into a banishing light, basically, we saw in white. The problem is a lot of your enchantments are creatures, which are removable, and even the ones that aren't are removable because everyone has enchantment, so everyone has an enchantment removal. So, I mean, that effect is really good, but there's a little bit of the Banishing Light problem as well. And that kind of like two for ones you in a way because they get rid of whatever your enchantment was already doing, and they get their card back. So, all right. I mean, this is still good because you still have this Planeswalker, and the -7 return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. I guess that's fine. Um, so I think Calyx for a Planeswalker is somewhat disappointing. Having said that, like most Planeswalkers in Limited, it still seems quite good. I just don't think it's like Nutso Busto, maybe. I think it's like a B plus, and I'd rather have a lot of other rares, but maybe not any of the uncommons anyway. Let's move on to Dalico's Crafter of Wonders. 3 mana, 2/4. You add 2 colorless, which you can only spend to cast artifacts or activate their abilities, and equipped creatures you control have flying and haste. We'll see when we get to the artifacts whether there's enough equipment and or artifacts to make this good. If there's very much and you can get it, this card is very good. Like if there's expensive artifacts or playable equipment, like giving your equipment extra flying and haste probably makes the equipment good, like pretty darn good. Being able to cast and activate stuff is nice. A 3 mana 2/4 is already okay. I can't really give this a grade without seeing the artifacts in the set, which we'll see later. So I'm going to try to remember to come back to this, but tentatively I'm going to give this a B minus because I'm not expecting a lot of artifacts that are particularly good. Devourer of Memory, 2 mana 2/1. Whenever one or more cards are put into your graveyard from your library, it gets +1/+1 and can't be blocked until end of turn. You could spend 3 to mill yourself 1. So this can be a win condition all by itself. You spend 3 and you attack for 3 and you can't be blocked every turn. So if you've got the game under control, that's good. If you're milling yourself otherwise without this, that's good. If you have lots of escape stuff, this is good. Having said that, it's never seeming to be great to me. You can also worry a little bit about milling yourself out, because like if you're doing this every turn, it takes 7 turns to kill them. If this is the only thing you're using to kill them, you're milling yourself 7 times and you're drawing at least 7 cards. And you've drawn 7 cards at the start of the game. That's 21. You got to be able to do other stuff. Also, it takes a lot of mana, so like by the time you're killing them, you're probably low on cards. You maybe not be totally milled, but you're probably low on cards. So you're probably not entirely relying on this thing, but it's a pretty good card. I'm going to give it a C+. Dream Trawler, 6 mana, 3/5 flying lifelink. Whenever you draw a card, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So on your turn, it's a 4/5. Whenever it attacks, you draw a card, so it attacks as at least a 5/5. And then you can discard a card to give this thing hexproof until end of turn and tap it. This card is very good. It protects itself. It's a big flying lifelinker. The lifelink means it's going to be hard to race it. It gets to block the turn it comes down. It's hard to kill. Yeah, this is a bomb. This is a total bomb. This is an A. Only the hard to mana cost stops it from being an A+. Enigmatic Incarnation. At the beginning of your end step, you can sacrifice another enchantment. If you do, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed enchantment's converted mana cost. Put that on the battlefield and shuffle your library. This is way too many hoops. I'm going to give this an F. Eutropia, the twice favored. 3 mana 2/2. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature, and that gains flying until end of turn. You really need enchantments for this. You probably have enough to make this good. One trigger of this, you've got 3/3/4 of stats and a turn of flying. 2 triggers. I mean, this isn't as good as the mono green one, I don't think, where you're drawing cards and putting 1/1 counters on it. But you can distribute the counters here. You can give stuff flying. So this is still pretty good. I'm going to give it a B. Galley of the Endless Dance. 2 mana 2/2 haste. Other satyrs you control get +1/+1 and have haste. We did see some other satyrs, but not tons. If you attack with, whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you can discard a card at random if you do draw 2 cards. So that's really good, but it's not so easy to attack with 3 things. And and you need to have a card you want to discard. Drawing 2 is like worth discarding a card most of the time, but it is a lot of hoops to jump through that. I mean, 2 mana 2/2 haste is already good enough. The pump ability isn't going to pump much of your stuff, I don't think, but it's still good. This card has to be good. It's just a question of how good. And I'm a little bit leery that it can be great. I'm going to give it a C+. It wouldn't stun me if it's a B-, but I'm going to give it a C+. Let's move on now to Haktos the Unscarred. It attacks each combat if able. As it enters the battlefield, you pick 2, 3, or 4 at random, and it gets protection from each converted mana cost other than the chosen number. So it's a 4 mana 6/1, attacks every turn, which means it can't block well. It is vulnerable to 1 converted mana cost, but not to any others. Basically, your opponent going to need to have a creature with that converted mana cost, and it's going to have to trade it with. They're going to have to trade it with this. But they can do that. If they don't have a creature of that converted mana cost, this is getting in for 6. And this only needs to get in a couple times before they're in a world of hurt. Having said that, I think they're usually going to have like a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and a 4-drop, and this is really hard to cast. So I actually don't think this is that great, even in limited. Having said that, protection from age converted mana cost other than the chosen number is pretty powerful. So if you can deal with their only stuff of that number, then this looks really good. You could build your game plan around this. I think this is going to be like a B. Hero of the Nyxborn. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So this helps you go wide. Whenever you cast a spell that targets this, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Like we saw, the red-white is about going wide. This helps you go wide. This gives you that ability. It's a 2/2. It's 3/3 worth of stats spread over 2 bodies for 3 mana. It is an enchantment. It's all the stuff you want, especially for this archetype. I think this is a B. A solid B. Maybe even a B+. But I think just a B probably. Because it dies to a lot, and you have to be a little bit worried about that when you're trying to target it. Klothys, God of Destiny. 3 mana, isn't a creature as long as your devotion to red and green is less than 7. So that's a little bit different than the monocolored ones because it's got 2 colors that count for it, but it needs 7 instead of 5. It also has 2 pips though because it's both red and green. It has to have a red pip and a green pip. So you need 5 other devotion, which is a little bit more than the other ones, which need only 4 other devotion. But you get to count 2 different colors here. It's indestructible like all of them, and then it has one other ability, which is at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, exile a target card from a graveyard. If it was a land, you get to add a mana, which is either red or green, which is nice early on. Otherwise, if it wasn't a land, you get to gain 2 life, and it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So as long as there are non-land cards in graveyards, this is draining 2 every turn, which is really good, even if you don't turn this thing on. Now you need to get non-land cards in graveyards, but I don't think it's that hard to get some because it can be either graveyard. So it's not that hard, I think, to get some cards into graveyards. And even if it's like every other turn draining for 2, that's still like okay. Sometimes it's going to add mana. This card seems very good to me. It seems like the best of the gods probably. It's also, if you're red-green, probably easier to turn on than any of the monocolored ones. Of course, you do have to be red-green, which I guess makes it worse than the other ones, maybe, because it locks you into a 2-color combination. But, like, if you can play it, it's better than the other ones, I think. Anyway, this card is very strong. It's an A for me. If it were monocolored, it'd be an A+. But it's not. I think I'm only going to give it an A. Kroxa, or if you know that you're red-green, it's an A+, but, you know, you often don't. Anyway, Kroxa, Titan of Hunger's Death. 2 mana for a 6/6. You know there's something wrong there. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. Yeah, okay. So effectively, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, so when you cast it for 2 mana, or when it attacks if you've gotten it in play, then each opponent discards a card. And then if they discarded a land, or they didn't discard anything because they were empty-handed, they take 3 damage. That's a good effect. 2 mana to make them discard a card and maybe make them take 3 is really not worth it, probably, if it didn't have the escape option. but it does have the escape option, which is black, black, red, red, exile. You do need 5 other cards in your graveyard, so it's going to take a while. But then you get a 4 mana 6/6, which, I mean, by the time you can do it, that it's 4 mana is probably not going to be super important. But anyway, it's still good. When it enters the battlefield, they have to discard another card, and then they might take 3 more damage, and then every time it attacks, the same thing. So this card is very, very good. Uh, it is a little bit tricky on the mana and on needing stuff to exile it. I'm not really worried about that, but it's enough to keep me from giving it like an A plus. And in fact, I'm going to give it an A minus. Kunoros, Hound of Athreos. We have a 3 mana 3/3 Vigilance Menace lifelink. I'm in. Creature cards and graveyards can't enter the battlefield. So you'd have to watch out. That does turn off your own escape as well. Players can't can't cast spells from graveyards. Right. So actually, I think it's the second part that turns off escape for both players. But 3 mana 3/3 Vigilance Menace lifelink, worth. Um, it's yeah, it's a bit hard to block too profitably. It's going to gain you some life and deal some damage. What more do you want? And it holds back opposing small creatures. What do you want? What more do you want? B plus. Um, maybe just a B. Yeah, just a B. Mischievous Chimera. 2 mana 2/2 flyer. I'm in. Whenever you cast your first spell during your opponent's turn, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you get to scry 1. That's not that exciting, but it's still pretty good. It's mostly just like a nice aggressive 2-drop. Yeah, B minus. Like 2 mana 2/2 flyer is good, but it's not as impressive as some of the others, I think. Pelucranos Unchained. 4 mana 0/0 that enters with 6/1/1 counters on it unless it enters because it escaped. And if it enters because it escaped, it gets 12 1/1 counters on it. If damage would be dealt to this thing while it has a 1/1 counter on it, prevent that damage, but you do lose that many 1/1 counters. Okay. But it also has 3 mana to fight another target creature. So this probably trades for 2 of your opponent's things, and then it comes back and trades for any number of your opponent's things and wins you the game. 4 mana 6/6. This card is extremely good, and there's a couple of ways to exile it, but otherwise it's probably going to win just about every game. This has got to be an A+. Rise to Glory. Choose one or both. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, or target aura from your graveyard to the battlefield. Yeah, this is okay as a reanimation card for 5 mana. Getting an aura is not really where I want to be. I know that it's going to have something to put it on as long as I have a creature to bring back. Having a creature to bring back, like 5 mana for a reanimation effect, is it's just not that exciting to me these days, most of the time. So I think I'm only going to give this a C+. 2 colors, asks a lot, 5 mana for reanimation, which is fine but not that great. Has to be from your graveyard. It's just not that exciting to me. Still a solid card, still want to play it if you're white-black, but only like a C+, and I'd be very sad if I end up having to first pick this. Okay, Siona, Captain of the Pylias. 3 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 7 cards from your library. You can put an aura from among them into your hand, put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Whenever an aura becomes attached to a creature you control, you make a 1/1. I don't like this card because I don't want to be playing that many auras. This card says play a lot of auras because you want to find one from the ETB and you want to play them on your creatures to make 1/1s. I especially don't want auras that I'm putting on my dudes. Now, there are like a few of them that we saw earlier that were okay, but I'm just not super in for it. So I'm only going to give this a C+ as well. I think the biggest thing going for it is there's like that removal aura, and some of the other auras are okay. So it's got a pretty decent chance of being a 3 mana 2/2 draw removal spell, which is really good. But you really want to have a lot of those. In fact, I might just give this a C. You really need to build around it, and when you build around it, unless it's because you've gotten like 3 or 4 of those removal auras, I'm not that excited still. Okay, Slaughter Priest of Mogus, 2 mana 2/2. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Okay. On an X2, that's not so exciting. Except that if you use this to and sacrifice another creature enchantment, this gets first strike until end of turn, which is big for threat of activation because, first of all, just sacking anything else is going to make this a 4/2 first strike, which is kind of hard to block. You could sacrifice a couple things, it's going to be real hard to block. So that's pretty good. Still less exciting than several of the others. C plus B minus. I guess I'm going to go with B minus. And no, I'm only going to go with C plus. There's just gold card disadvantage. I don't really want to first pick a gold card. This isn't strong enough to make me want to first pick a gold card. Let's go next with Staggering Insight. It's an aura. And enchant creature, when an enchanted creature gets +1/+1, lifelink, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. You really need to be able to connect with the creature, so you want like a flyer. If you've got a flyer, giving it lifelink and drawing a card every time it hits is good. I don't know how many flyers. I didn't think there were that many flyers, even in blue and white. Also not super excited about this. It's got the aura disadvantage. C plus, probably a C plus. If you can also just stick it on a big thing, like that's okay. They probably need to chump it, and you're getting a bunch of life still. But there's a lot of situations where it's not good. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, similar to the black-red one we saw a little bit ago. This one's 3 mana on the upfront for a 6/6, but you have to sacrifice it if it didn't escape. When it enters a battlefield or attacks, again, has a similar trigger to old Titans as well. You gain 3 life, draw a card, and can put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. So, drawing a card for sure is better than probably making them discard. Gaining life for sure is better than maybe making them lose life. And putting a land from your hand onto the battlefield is probably not that important, but it's nice. It does cost 1 more, but I don't think that's the super important thing. The escape cost is more or less the same, obviously green and blue instead of black and red. This card seems better than the other one to me, and the other one seemed pretty good already. This card also seems like an A+ to me. I definitely want it. Warden of the Chained, 3 mana 4/4 trample, can't attack unless you control another creature with power 4 or greater, but it can block. Card is super solid. Red-green wants to have lots of big creatures. This is 3 mana for 4/4 trample. This is where I want to be. I'm going to give this a B. Artifacts, Alter the Pantheon, 3 mana that adds 1 to your devotion for whatever you're checking your devotion for. And it's a mana rock. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color. I don't think I like this card unless I'm trying to splash, in which point I might want this card because it helps me splash. Bronze Sword, 1 mana, equip creature gets +2/+0, equip 3. Equip 3 is pretty expensive, so I'm kind of out on this because the equip cost is really important, and equip 3 is really expensive. If I've got that red-blue legend, I probably play this because this card isn't that bad. Like if it's 2 to equip, this card is perfectly playable, has been in the past. Here, the thing is about, like, especially the +2/+0 mechanic equipment, you probably want to move it around, but it's hard to do that with an equip cost of 3 to be able to move it like multiple times a turn. So I'm kind of down on this. I still think it might be playable, but I'm only going to give it like a D+, I think. 3 mana for Entrancing Lyre is next. You may choose not to untap it during your untap step. You can play X and tap it to tap target creature with power X or less. It doesn't untap as long as this remains tapped. So basically it's an expensive removal spell, but it is colorless. As you know what colors you are, this gets less important, but I could see pack 1 pick 1ing this. I'm going to give it a C+. It is a pretty inefficient removal spell, although you can also move it around. No, I'm going to give it a B-. You can also move it around. If the opponent plays a better creature, you can untap this, spend X again for their better creature, and tap that down instead. So I think this is like a B-, and it's especially better at the beginning of the draft when you don't want to commit to colors. Once you have committed to colors, it's not quite as good because, well, staying open is less important once you know what colors you are, but the card seems good. Mirror Shield. 2 mana equipment. Equipped creature does +0/+2, meh. Has hexproof, meh. And whenever a creature with Death Touch blocks or becomes blocked by this creature, destroy that creature. Oh, flavorful, but meh. I don't want this card in my deck. My opponent would need to show me multiple death touch creatures before I'd want to sideboard it in. Um, if they've shown me 2, or maybe by game 3, if they've shown me like 3 that I know that they have at least 3 copies, I might bring this in, but I still might not. This card is like a D. D minus really, but maybe you can bring it out on the sideboard. Nyx Lotus, 4 mana, legendary artifact, enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to choose a color, add amount of mana equal to your devotion to that color to your mana pool. I don't think you need to add this much mana. Once you have 4 mana, how much more do you need to add? Not that much. I don't think this is worth a card slot in your deck. I don't think we've seen big payoffs for ramping super hard. This is like a D minus. Maybe you can find some deck that really wants the ramp, but I don't think so with this already costing 4. Maybe in Cube or other formats, right? But I don't think here. Shadow Spear. Shadow Spear is 1 mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, has trample and lifelink. Equips for only 2, and you can pay 1 to remove hexproof and indestructible from permanents your opponent's control, which is probably not going to come up very much, but there is some hexproof stuff, so it might come up. The equipment part of this, +1/+1, pretty decent. I mean, 1 and 2, I want more than that. But trample and lifelink, altogether, this is a pretty good package. It puts it in the B range for me, I think. Especially early on, I take it higher because it's going to go into any deck. It's going to be a good card in any deck. Later on, a bit worse. So pack 1, pick 1, I'd probably put this at about a B. But later on, B minus probably. Later on being like once you've determined your colors. Soul Guide Lantern. When it enters the battlefield, exile target card from a graveyard. Not worth it. You can sacrifice it to exile each opponent's graveyard. Also not worth it. 1 tap and sacrifice it to draw a card. Yeah, this does not seem good. Your opponent needs to have like multiple escape bombs before I'd want to bring this in. This seems like a D minus. I mean, it's not that bad because it's like 2 mana to exile a card from their graveyard and draw a card. So it kind of cycles. So I guess maybe it's just like a D, because like if they have some escape, then this might be able to nuke something and then draw a card. But I'm not excited by it for sure. Let's move on to Thaumaturge's Familiar. This is a 3 mana 1/3 flying. When it enters the battlefield, scry 1. I think 1/3 flying for 3 is just not good enough. It's like a D. Thundering Chariot is a vehicle, 4 mana for a 3/3 artifact vehicle. First strike, trample, haste, and crew 1. Wow, first strike. That's pretty good. 4 mana 3/3 first strike, trample, haste is good. And it is a vehicle which has some upsides and some downsides, but I don't think it's that many upsides or that many downsides compared to escaping sorcery speed removal mostly. We do expect there's a little bit more artifact removal because a lot of the enchantment removal crosses over. But I think this is a solid card, C plus B minus. Traveler's Amulet, 1, and then 1 tap sack, or not tap, but 1 sack it. You could search for a basic land, reveal it, and put it in your hand. So this is well, it's fixing if you need fixing. Don't play it otherwise. It's like a D plus. If you're in splashing a 3rd color or playing 3 colors, you definitely want it. Otherwise, you almost certainly don't. Wings of Hubris. Equipped creature has flying. Sacrifice it. Equipped creature can't be blocked this turn. Sacrifice it, that being the creature, at the beginning of the next end step. And equip for, that's 1, right? Equipping to give a creature flying, I think is probably not worth the card usually. The extra stuff helps like a little bit. You can get unblockable 1 time. You have to lose the creature, so you better hope you're winning the game, but I think this is like a D plus, maybe just a D. I don't know. It's a little bit hard for me to tell how important being able to give flying is. Probably like if you're just big green dumb idiots, it gets a little bit better and you might play it, which is kind of why I like it at D plus instead of D. You might play a copy if you're big dumb green idiots. I don't know, but it's not that good. And unlike the other equipment, it doesn't even work quite as well with that blue red legend because this already gives flying, so that thing gives flying is a little bit of a nombo. Move on to lands. Field of Ruin is back. It's like a D minus that you can bring in the sideboard if your opponent has a really good land, I guess. But mostly you're not going to have a target for it, and then it's really bad because it's just a colorless land for you. Labyrinth of Scophos. This was referenced on one of the cards we saw earlier. You could tap it for colorless. You could pay 4 and tap it to remove target attacking or blocking creature from combat. Note that unlike Maze of Ith, this does not untap the creature you removed from combat. It stays tapped. So that is an upside mostly, I think. If you're using it on your opponent's creatures, then it's definitely an upside because you don't have to untap them if they're attacking. This has some uses. Obviously can save you a bunch of life. It takes a ton of mana. It takes 5 mana effectively because you can't use the mana from this and you need 4 more. But the effectiveness is pretty good. It's like it can actually help you on offense because it makes double blocking a lot harder because you could just remove one of their blockers and then you eat the other one. And then it can save you some damage from attacks if you've like flooded out and have nothing better to do with your mana. I think overall those effects are pretty good, but it being colorless is like a real drawback. I'm gonna give it B minus. The temples, it's like a B if you have the one card that cares about it, I guess. The temples, I'm gonna grade all at once. They're dual lands. They enter the battlefield tapped, and you scry 1. I think they're like C plus. They're a little bit better if you're both colors. If they're double off color, I wouldn't play it. If they're single off color, I would play it. Yeah, once you move later in the draft, you can shift their priority a little bit. Pack 1, pick 1, I'd probably rate them around a C plus to B minus. Unknown Shores, do not play this card. Somehow if you're 5 color and just have oodles of extra mana, maybe you could play it. If you're really hurting for fixing, you can maybe play it, but it's really bad fixing. You really don't want to play, you'd much rather play like Traveler's Amulet. There does look to be enough little bits of fixing, Unknown Shores, Traveler's Amulet, Alter the Pantheon, especially if your green had a few more. Fixing cards, especially at high rarity, but there are a couple of commons as well. If you want to splash, you should be able to splash in this format probably, but it's going to be real hard to play 3 color. These lands look real pretty to me, and they're basics, so yeah. That's it for the whole review. Hope you've enjoyed. If you have comments, questions, disagreements, any of these parts, please leave a comment on the appropriate video. I wish I would have made this disclaimer at the end of all of them, but whatever. Make a comment on the appropriate video. I will try to get back to you. And yeah, hope you have a good rest of your day and have fun drafting the set.